Hi everyone. Battles and Battlefields of Ancient Greece, a guide to their history, topography and archaeology by Jacob Butera and Matthew Sears. I'm just going to read the blurb on this one because I think it's quite interesting. So Greece was home to some of the most evocative and decisive battles in the ancient world. This volume brings together the ancient evidence and modern scholarship on 20 battlefields throughout Greece, and will be a handy resource for visitors of every level of experience, from the member of a guided tour to the veteran military historian. The introductory chapter outlines some of the most pressing and interesting issues in the study of ancient Greek battles and battlefields, and offers a crash course on ancient warfare. 20 lively chapters explore battlefields selected for both their historical importance and their inspiring sites. In addition to accessible historical overviews of each battle, this book provides all the information needed for an intellectually and aesthetically rewarding visit, including transport and travel details, museum overviews, and further reading. So it's kind of a coffee table style book. It's pretty hefty actually. You can kind of see it's moderately thick, considering it's covering 20 battles, but it's quite a good thorough introduction talking about ancient warfare from both the perspective of the Greeks and the Romans. So although it's a coffee table book, it's kind of aiming to give an overview of key battles between the ancient Greek city-states, Macedon, and the Romans, from the Battle of Marathon 490 BC to Actium in 31 BC. So it provides like key events of the battle as a guide on how to visit the site. And there's also kind of map there, but it's a lot of like colour photography. It's a really high quality kind of book. It's got really thick glossy pages. Like the production of it is really nice. So it's really just a selection of what they've kind of termed the key battles, and I would kind of agree that most of them are in there, especially for the Greeks. I think most kind of students of ancient Greek history kind of know what the key ones are really by now. There's other books, in fact I think one of them's here, which are kind of more exhaustive. This one aims to cover a lot more battles but in less detail. It's kind of more of a reference book for that. So we kind of go from some of the most well-known battles from like Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis. And these are some of the battles that I know pretty well. And I was really pleased at how they were kind of dealt with in this book. They seem to include all the key points, and the stuff that was left out is probably more of the unnecessary details they didn't really need. And obviously, I think if they included everything they could, this book would be a bit of a beast and it would kind of not really work. Because it's also doubling up as a kind of mini sort of travel guide. I'm not really sure if you'd want to kind of lug this high quality, moderately heavy book around, but maybe you stick it in the car and then reference it if you're driving to sites of the battles, for example. And yeah, so it's got those kind of battles. We've got battles like Plataea, Epaminondas's victory over the Spartans at Leuctra. It's kind of a good breadth of the key battles, I would say. And 20 feels like a good number. I think they match the kind of level of detail and depth effectively to the size of the book and the number of battles that they included, because they are covering some Roman battles as well. And obviously there's always an argument that you could just include more and more, but like I said, I think it then starts to defeat its purpose and just become a bit of a beast, which is not what it's trying to do. The book does a good job of recalling the primary sources. So, for example, for the Battle of Amphipolis, the author has mentioned Thucydides, who's obviously the main source we have today for the Peloponnesian War. And it calls out the topographical features quite nicely, which helps us to reconstruct where the battle took place. And I think that's a good sign, because it kind of shows the authors have done their homework in terms of leaning on the primary sources, looking at both, topographical and archaeological material. That's what you want. You want the facts to be taken into consideration in a book like this. For Rome, a couple of the battles, the battles of Caesar at Pharsalus and Octavian at Actium, a couple of key ones. So it's kind of a strange book in that it's sort of doing a couple of different things, because it's for people who want to visit the sites and want to know more. I think if you know about the battles a lot, this book is more of like a nice to have. You probably want it on your shelf, not in isolation, if you're really trying to like understand all the battles of Greece or Macedon, for example, especially Rome. I think there's only a few in there. It's not comprehensive, but it's a sample of like the key ones. The book was published in 2019, so there shouldn't be too much change to directions, but I bet there are changes, but it's still fairly recent and relevant. To summarize, I think this book strikes a great balance between historical accuracy, context, and brevity, and it's presented extremely well. Just to give a little taste of what's included, for the Battle of Plataea, the authors recall how the Persian cavalry commander Mecistius could not be killed, and it led to a heroic effort both for the Greeks trying to take his life. So, I quote, "Mecistius himself fought vigorously for his life in the thick of his enemies. He was finally killed when a Greek soldier stabbed him in the eye. A truly Homeric struggle erupted around the body, reminiscent of the pitched battle for Patroclus' body in the Iliad." So, as you can kind of tell from that quote, the book's written with accuracy and uses all the primary sources like I mentioned, but it's also written in quite a lively fashion. It's actually quite enjoyable to read. And I think the challenge is about how much to include for something like this is the kind of key question, and staying interesting whilst doing that. And I think the book does an excellent job of that. It makes it really hard to criticise, actually. For this purpose, it's very effective at what it's trying to do. Some of the maps are quite basic. I think I showed one earlier. Here we go. It is quite basic as in terms of the way maps go. And maybe you kind of want more detail, but I think there's also there's kind of detailed directions if you're actually trying to travel to the sites. So I think they struck a good balance. I think really those kind of criticisms are probably a bit nitpicky, to be honest. The colour photography of the battlefields is a really nice addition. It kind of like, again, it's kind of bringing it to life as much as you can now. So the only potential contradiction I would say in a book like this is, I do think it's trying to do two things at once. It's kind of trying to be like a lavish coffee table style book that you just kind of show off to your other ancient history friends. Or is it trying to be like a bit of a tour guide? It's sort of trying to do both things. But it actually does both of those roles really well. If you were to visit the sites, you could just take the notes down or even just screenshot the pages, because I think there's only like 2 or 3 pages per battle that you need for the directions. So then you kind of have like a backup to Google Maps. Obviously, I think nowadays something like this isn't needed so much, but where you might have an advantage in a book like this is it's probably going to call stuff out that when you travel to a site, it might have more info that you don't necessarily get, obviously, from Google Maps. So it does have its uses there. So I think the book's really an excellent addition to any ancient historical warfare or ancient history fans collection. And I'm actually going to give this one a really high score, 9 out of 10. I think it excels at what it does. You can kind of see that contradiction that I talked about in the purpose of the book, but the thing is, it does both those roles really well. The kind of direction sections are really well laid out and they're quite brief, but the actual reading and detail of the battle is taken into account while still being lively. You could say some of the maps could have been a bit better, a bit more detailed, but it kind of feels like nitpicking, really. You could argue that it includes more battles, or that there's a key one that's been left out. I felt like most of the important ones were in there. And to be honest, the ones they left out, I think, is probably a bit of just a trade-off. There's probably kind of like 50-50 out of this one. So I think that's fine. As always, like and follow for more videos. Be doing plenty more ancient history ones. That one just behind my thumb there is in a similar vein. I'll do a review of that. So yeah, keep following. I've got plenty of more ancient history reviews coming up. Thanks.